Hola amigos de Wine News TV, les invito a conectar conmigo y con mis invitados en Wine News TV On The Go, un podcast que a su vez es un espacio donde aprenderás sobre el mágico mundo del vino a través de invitados de todas partes del mundo que nos contarán sobre sus proyectos para obsequiarnos de forma embotellada música, fuego y leones, como decía el gran maestro argentino Jorge Luis Borges en su poema Soneto al Vino. Hola amigos de Wine News TV, el podcast. Qué placer para mí reencontrarme con Eric Bass de Dr. Konstantin Frank o Dr. Frank, como le conocemos muchos los amantes de los vinos de esta bodega que llegan a Puerto Rico con Serrayes. Qué placer para mí estar aquí en los Finger Lakes, en un clima que a mí me gusta el frío porque me hace sentir que he salido de mi tierra y que estoy en otro lugar del mundo aprendiendo y conociendo. Y hoy vamos a hablar de Cool Climate Wines, vamos a hablar de vinos que son elegantes, versátiles, gastronómicos, con unos alcoholes moderados, con altas notas aromáticas y por supuesto vinos perfectos para nuestro clima en el Caribe. Now we're going to switch on to English. Eric, I was just telling the audience that it's a pleasure to see you again. I'm going to link the interview that we did 3-4 years ago in Puerto Rico at Serrayes so that they can go and see the video. Now we're doing audio. I'm trying to grow on the podcast world now. How are you, my friend?
I'm great. Welcome to the Finger Lakes, and so good to spend some time with you again.
Likewise. So I was just telling in the introduction to the listeners that if they like cool climate, aromatic, elegant, versatile, gastronomic wines that do not want to compete with the food for protagonism, but rather play a nice second fiddle, that are very gastronomic, they don't have to get on a plane and go to Austria or go to Germany. They can if they want, or for that matter, go to the other coast. If you live in New York City, if you live in Florida to here is what, 3 hours in a plane? In Puerto Rico, it's 3.5 hours from San Juan to JFK, and then an hour from Rochester to here. So you gotta come visit the Finger Lakes, and if you want to come to the Finger Lakes to find a little bit more about its history, what a better place than Dr. Frank, the patriarch of the region, the pioneer, the man who started the revolution. Let's talk a little bit about that, and then we go into the wines. I know I'm going to speak to Dr. Frank's grandson. It's a privilege. That's going to be the second part of this interview. But just touch a bit on the role this winery plays and has played for the region as a whole.
Yeah, so Dr. Frank was originally from Ukraine, and he managed vineyards over there. He received a PhD with a doctoral thesis on cool climate viticulture.
Wow.
And he made wine for the czars. He made wine for the communists after the Revolution, and he was even there during World War I and World War II.
Wow.
And at the end of World War II, he had to leave. For better or worse, his whole village spoke German. He spoke 6 languages, but they were originally Prussian immigrants back when Prussia and Russia were allies.
Mm-hmm.
And his whole town spoke German. And at the end of World War II, Stalin, being very upset about the occupation by the Germans, was marching off and killing anyone who spoke German.
Wow.
So he had to escape with his family. I'll accelerate it a little bit. He made it to this country in 1951.
Okay.
After having to go through a process of being sponsored, etc. And when he first got here, like many immigrants, no one accepted his accreditation.
Mm-hmm.
He had a 1-bedroom apartment in Lower Manhattan.
Is that where he went to? Manhattan,
yes.
Like a lot of immigrants to New York City.
Yep,
okay.
He came into Manhattan, and he lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with his family, and he immediately asked, are they making wine? Where do they make wine? And he realized that they were making wine up here in the Finger Lakes, and so he started getting on a bus. His wife, Eugenia, would pack him sandwiches, and he would get on a bus, come up, and he found there was an experimental station in Geneva, New York, and it was a cooperative effort between the New York State Department of Agriculture and Cornell University. And when he first got there, again, they did not accept his PhD.
Mm-hmm.
They said, you can probably help us. They gave him a small project managing blueberries. And he immediately started asking, why are you not growing vinifera?
Mm-hmm.
And they thought it was too cold.
Okay.
He knew it was phylloxera.
Mm-hmm.
And he also knew that if you grafted onto native rootstock, that you could avoid the phylloxera because
For those out there who may not be so technical or savvy in wine, vinifera are the noble grapes, Riesling, Chardonnay. What were they growing here? Like native hybrids?
Yeah,
What
they have
grapes were?
Concord
Okay.
and the Concord Vignol. There's a whole group of grapes that are native to this area, and that's what they were making the wine out of. And they were trying to grow vinifera, but every time they would plant it, within about 2 or 3 years, it would die.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't realize that that microscopic louse, that little pest in the soil, was eating the grapes.
So in the early 50s, Dr. Frank posed the question, why not grow vinifera here?
Yes.
And then that's when kind of things started.
Well, and so the interesting thing was, I mentioned he spoke 6 languages. English was not one.
Oh, wow.
But he managed to gather an ally. So there was a winemaker here at the time who was the former winemaker at Veuve Clicquot, and he was making sparkling wine at Great Western here, and he was French. And so Dr. Frank was able to converse with him fluently in French and start expressing these ideas of,
Wonderful.
You can grow vinifera here. It's not as cold as where I came from. And his initial job managing vineyards was for Great Western. And he was given a position to see if he could grow vinifera. And he was immediately successful for them. And he realized the potential. And so that's when he purchased this property that we're on right now. The brick house that you came in was his original house.
Wow.
And he planted initially 60 different varietals here on this site because he was much more of a scientist and he didn't know what was going to work and what wouldn't. But he planted everything he could think of, from whether it be what he was working with in Ukraine, like Arcazzelli, Saperavi, the French grape varietals, the Italians. He planted all these different varietals, and then over time figured out what worked on various sites.
Like a blank canvas, and he had the opportunity to experiment. He was a trailblazer, a pioneer, an adventurer. Incredible. When did he pass? What year did he pass?
I don't honestly know, to tell you the truth. I think he passed in the 90s, okay. So it was quite a while ago. And so his son, Willie Frank, took over the winery, and Willie is noted for being the person who started our sparkling wine program.
Okay.
And Dr. Frank and Willie didn't agree on the production of sparkling wines. Dr. Frank thought that the only people that would make sparkling wines were those that couldn't get their grapes right.
Okay.
And Willie just loved champagne.
Okay.
So Willie basically said, well, I want to be involved in the winery, but I want to make sparkling wine. Mm-hmm. And so Willie's credited with being the first person in our winery, being the first winery to make traditional method, traditional varietal sparkling wines here in the Finger Lakes, and that was in 1985.
Yeah, I've read and I've seen. I was studying, trying to reconnect with whatever little knowledge I had of the region, because Finger Lakes it's well known in the U.S. I think there's incredible opportunity to grow beyond, like Latin America, in certain parts where it's really hot. But when you read or you hear or you approach the Finger Lakes wine region as a whole, you always hear that Riesling is queen or king, Cab Franc is making a lot of progress, but they speak about the sparklers, how beautiful they are from here. So I did not know that part, that Willie Frank was the pioneer of that.
Yeah, and actually sparkling wine, there are a lot of people who are speculating that sparkling wine may be one of the future really big things here, because our grapes, personally, coming out of our vineyards, you pick a little early for sparkling, and the chemical makeup of the grapes, the sugars, the acids, the phenolics are very similar to what you'd find in champagne. The difference here is our minerality. Like I always find our sparklers, and we'll taste them later, have a distinct sort of whetstone minerality, whereas champagne has that classic chalk. Mm-hmm. But the wines are absolutely spectacular. And they do very well for us. They typically get very high scores from critics, and I think it's an area of potential.
I can only hope they make it to Puerto Rico, because we love our bubbles down there. I'm going to talk to Ricky and let him know that we need them. We need them on site. Okay, so we have 6 bottles, And I want to touch a little bit about what I said in the introduction that we're going to talk about the cool climate wines. What is, and this is a very, very, very idiotic question, but I want to perhaps do a little deep dive on the concept of a cool climate. It's obviously wine that's grown in colder climate. But what is a cool climate wine? Maybe in a minute or two that you can let viewers or wine lovers out there or those who are starting in wine know what it is when they hear that term cool climate wine.
The quickest analogy I can make to you is it's very similar to wines from different parts of Europe.
Okay.
Specifically the northern parts. Cool climate. If you're in Europe, if you're in Sicily, if you're in the southern, if you're in Spain, southern Spain, it's not a cool climate atmosphere. It's much more similar to what we have on the West Coast here. But it is very similar to Austria, Germany, Alsace, France, the northern regions of Europe. And it's typically, you're working with varietals that are able to withstand a very cold winter. I'm sure you'll be showing pictures.
Yeah.
Right now it's about 18 or 19 degrees here. It will get much colder. It'll probably be -5 to -10 at some point in the next couple months. And certain varietals will not work in these climates. Their buds get damaged. So varietals like Riesling, varietals like Gruner Veltliner, even Chardonnay on the right sites can withstand this kind of cool temperature. And so basically, we're working with much less degree days. We're working, we have a limited amount of time. If you compare us to California, they come in the spring, they get an early blossom, and they have a very extended growing period without much bad weather. Here, we have to wait for the spring to come. We have to hope after the blossoms we don't have a frost or after the buds start to push. And then we have a limited window of opportunity to get enough sun on the vines to get ripeness in our grapes. And so our grapes always express a really good acidity. They typically express minerality from the sites that they come from. And they're lighter in alcohol compared to those from the West Coast or from
These are the
southern
type
regions.
of wine, and I said this, I'm here with my friend Tito from Discover FLX Wineries. My friend who's half German, half Puerto Rican, follow him for sure. He was laughing because in an interview I said that cool climate wines typically tend to have lower alcohol. So it's the kind of wine that you can have a bottle, a half bottle, and then go to work the next day without headache, right? It's something that you can consume a bit more relaxed, right?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't seem like a lot, but if you're talking a couple of points of alcohol,
Oh, of course.
it does make a difference. And and I feel like they're very pleasant to have a glass or two, especially in warmer weather out on the decks here at beaches. But they're also, from a gastronomic point of view, that they pair very well. They don't, as you mentioned earlier, they don't compete with the food.
They don't try to steal
typically
the spotlight.
complement
Like
the food.
if you have a fish, you have a nice piece of meat or pasta, the wine needs to know he or she is the supporting actor, not the lead actor, right?
Yeah, and we look for from a point of view like you're like a sommelier, you're typically looking to either complement or contrast, but you almost always want balance in a wine. And sometimes some bigger, higher alcohol wines don't achieve that.
No,
they
lose
their acidity.
I call them pornographic
Yeah,
wines.
so they're big, they're impressive, but it's they don't pair well with food because they're all fruit or all alcohol.
There are wines that try to represent or reenact Godzilla versus King Kong on a plate. You don't want that.
No. And our wines for the whole region of the Finger Lakes and our wines here at this winery, I would say they have nuance and they have these subtle little, whether it's a floral.
Let's go to taste. Let's go to taste. What do we have first on the left? What is this, buddy?
So this is our dry Riesling. Cheers.
Okay. Let's see what we have here. Cheers, Tito.
Cheers, Tito.
Tell me about this dry Riesling.
So dry Riesling, so we have two main sites. We're sitting on our home vineyard. We also have a site that's in Hector, a much warmer area between two lakes. It's still cold in a relative sense. It's just warmer and has deeper topsoil than here. This dry Riesling, I think, reflects a lot of what you get out of the grapes up here. So this is a combination of grapes from both, but I think you'll see a lot of acid structure, a lot of minerality, some of the fruits tend to be more green in some
Yeah.
senses, and by that I mean more lime than lemon. Not underripe, more green apple. And for this particular wine, I love it with fresh seafood. I love it.
It's gorgeous. It's delicate. It's ethereal. Has very nice acidity, which is very well balanced by a very, evident, delicious green apple sort of fruit. Has a little bit of tart, which is delicious to cut through the food in terms of an acidity like a green apple. That's what I mean by that. Very nice. And this one is available in Puerto Rico, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Yes,
it
it
is with Serra. Yes. Okay. Now we're going to go to wine number 2, and can you tell us what we have here?
This is our semi-dry Riesling. So the first Riesling has about 0.7 residual sugar, so it's considered dry. This one has about 2.5%. And I feel like this shows you a little more of the fruit profile from the other vineyard, where you get lifted aromatics, maybe a little more petrol on the nose, and riper fruit tones, possibly a softer texture on the palate.
Riper fruit for sure, a little spicier. Let's see on the palate.
And this wine is more similar to what people, when they expect a little bit of sweetness in a Riesling. And for a traditional like cheese plate where you have different cheeses, fruits, etc., this works very well. But also something with a little spice. You have Criolla is popular with different dishes in Puerto Rico. This will play with those exotic spices a little more interestingly, and you can add a little heat if someone is starting to use some different chili peppers.
I love the fact that the first one is sort of like a green apple. We're moving more into the yellow apple here, and a little bit more of a spicy note to it. Delicious to pair even with Mexican food. Very, very nice. And this is also available in PR, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Great. So the third one, this is a new label for me. I don't know what we're having here. Tell me about this one.
So this is Eugenia, and this is a series of wines. We have 4 wines that are named after significant women in the history of the family.
What a nose. Yeah. Who was Eugenia?
So Eugenia was Dr. Frank's wife.
Okay.
And this comes from a block that was planted in 1958. We produce about 300 cases. It's taken all the way dry. This is a 2023, so it's a baby. This wine will age for decades. It's a little austere right now, but the intensity and the length on this wine are
aromatics
incredible.
Are spectacular.
This is a special wine.
Thank you for this. Thank you for
the
opportunity
of course.
to taste this.
And like I said, it's a baby. It's a little restrained right now, but you'll gather the intensity.
This one I'm not spitting. I need to assess the finish. Oh wow, the length, the post-taste. Yeah, the acidity is remarkable here. And there's a salinity to it that's very refreshing. There's a gorgeous sensation of white fruit that's in an infant stage. I think it's going to integrate very nice in the coming years. It's going to become darker in color. And this is a type of wine that will eventually get a little nutty, like that with a honeyed component, but that's 20, 30 years from now. It's going to be totally different. There's a bit of chamomile here as well, white flowers, and I'm very impressed with the finish. Lengthy, very nice wine. Eugenia, how much does this retail for here?
It retails for about $40.
$40.
So
it's a steal. This wine compares with a top Rhine Mosel wine that goes for $75. It's delicious. Yeah. And the alcohol is very moderate. What do we have here? 12 alcohol. Yeah. So this is, do you carry this in Florida? We have a lot of Puerto Ricans.
We don't have it in Florida yet. I'm hoping to bring it there, actually.
Okay, gorgeous. And Megan Frank, I think I was going to meet with her, but she's traveling.
She's traveling.
Yeah.
She's actually in Florida right now.
Oh, okay. Hopefully I'll get to meet her when I come back. Tito's going to be in charge of the agenda. Lovely. My great-grandmother, Eugenia Bartle Frank, was a woman with a tenacious spirit, surviving the Russian Revolution, 2 world wars, and starting a new life in America. Her resilience kept the Frank family together. She devoted herself to their American dream of founding our winery. Her memory lives on in this special Riesling, Megan Frank. What a beautiful message. And here you have some data for us wine geeks. You have that this is a Keuka State Block 8A vineyard. The soil is glaciated, shallow slate loam. This is what we're in front of?
Yeah, it's right out there.
Proximity, elevation, 1130 feet. proximity to lake, 2580. This is what, feet as well? The
Yes.
proximity to the lake.
Yep.
Harvest date, October 13, 2023. 348 cases produced. I'm taking a bottle of this to Puerto Rico, my friend. This is gorgeous. All right. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. So we just had 3 Rieslings, same grade, 3 interpretations.
Yes.
Okay. What are we doing next?
So we're going to switch to some other varietals. The first one is a Gruner Veltliner.
Famous in Austria. Love it.
Yeah, the primary white wine there. And it's a really interesting varietal. It's something Fred Frank studied in Germany for a period of time and fell in love with this grape. And so we planted it about 10 years ago, depending on the block. This is all grown in our warmer vineyard. It's a little too tender to grow up here by the winery. But Gruner in general has this unique characteristic that it pairs very well with vegetables, specifically green vegetables. It has high acidity, an herbal floral note, a peppery quality, and you can literally have it with raw green peppers or asparagus, and it just jumps like no other wine.
It's a lovely grape. I always find that sometimes in some iterations it has floral, but at the same time you can have some, I don't know if it's almonds or nuttiness. It's something that it's reminiscent of a dry fruit. And
yeah, no,
a little tinge of white honey somewhere in there as well. Very pretty Gruner.
And this is a wine that I love because Sauvignon Blanc drinkers can just enjoy it, by the glass while they're hanging out with friends. But
I do see the Saub. This is my first Gruner from Finger Lakes. I've never had it, and it behaves a bit like cool climate Sauv Blanc. Yep. And I do see that peppery note that you were talking about. Very nice. Wow, my first Gruner from the Finger Lakes.
It's a fun wine.
Yeah, it is.
And the hardest thing about that wine is explaining to people what it is, because it's not a very well-known varietal, but it's a delicious varietal. So as soon as you can get it in the glass, people usually like it.
Very nice.
So this
works
next
very well.
wine is a Chardonnay. Obviously the number one selling white in the world, and in this country even more dominant. But this is again a cool climate version. So this portion of it is fermented in oak, but we also keep a portion of it in stainless steel to maintain those high fruit tones. And the way I would describe this is I feel like the oak and everything is very well integrated.
It's a cross between Burgundy and New World Cool Climate.
Yes.
I do see that homage a little bit there too.
And I never compare myself to Burgundy, but it definitely it has some characteristics that
it's
I
my
think
favorite region, and I've had plenty of Burgundy, both whites and reds, and this is very well made because you do have that oak, but it's not trying to steal away from the fruit and
in some cases
the flintiness, the minerality, the stone.
In some cases, it might be a touch more fruit forward, as I was mentioning to you earlier, but just a touch, just a hair.
The equilibrium here is fantastic. How the apple and the lemon oil. I always find a little bit of lemon oil. It's much more subtle here. Certain high-end Burgundy whites are oily. This is leaner, but it's very pretty. And the oak is just a touch. It's you get it more in the nose, and the palate is just there to round up the wine a bit, but just a tiny bit. It's not a fat Chardonnay at all like you find on the West Coast. It's very linear. It's very nice.
It's almost like a texture, like a softness that is added to it. But, and Chardonnay in this form is also a great seafood wine. If you're having crab or something a little more decadent, Chardonnay works great.
And this alcohol level here is super manageable at only 12% alcohol. I always say that you don't need a lot of alcohol to make great wine. I would rather pose the opposite, that you want to make wines that are, expression of fruit rather than alcohol. Okay, so this is rosé. What is this?
This is a dry rosé, and rosé and I'll speak to us, but also cool climate regions in general. Rosé is something that is normally made. It serves two functions. So it's a bleed, a saignée. And this particular year, I mentioned earlier, we were a little short on our grapes. So this is a blend of 5 different varietals.
What a gorgeous sensation of strawberries, red fruits. You have oh my God, rose petal here. Oh, I love the little sort of green cranberry that's not ripe enough yet. Watermelon as well. The lemony quality to it, and then there's a whiff of some tropical note that I cannot detect what it is. I don't know if it's like a pineapple. Very nice, very nice, and there's an irony minerality to it as well. What are the 5 grapes?
So this has Pinot Noir, it has Merlot, Cab Franc, Cab Sauv, and a little bit of Saperavi, and it's really fun. We make a lot of rosés. This next vintage 24, we're going to have several single varietal rosés and this blend. But when you do the bleed, so I mentioned earlier the saignée, you basically, when you're harvesting red grapes, you'll do a bleed where you press the grapes at a light pressure and you let them sit on the skins for a very short period of time, about 12 hours. And then you'll move them off and that will become the rosé.
This is not in Puerto Rico. It is not.
That is not. You have a Salmon Run dry rosé,
yeah.
But this is one that we're discussing with Sarah.
This is, I don't want to badmouth the Salmon Row, but this is upper in quality
yes.
and price. Okay,
yes.
That the other is more relaxed, like at a different price point. This is spectacular. I may come back. I'm working with Tito on the logistics for the Rosé Soirée.
Yes.
I believe you may participate with this. I love that little cassis note that's coming from the cab.
Mm-hmm.
It's gorgeous. I'm loving this wine. And how much is this retail for?
Under $20. It's usually about 17. So
very nice. I'm loving this rosé. Very nice. Very well made. Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty. Very. What do you pair this with?
I love this with things like salmon. Rosé for me it's a tweener in that you can, if you introduce it correctly, you can get a red wine drinker to drink it, or you can get a white wine drinker to drink it.
It's best of both worlds, because you have the red, crunchy, mysterious red fruit and also the acidity, and you drink it at the temperature of a white.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, this is summertime smash wine.
Oh,
in all reality.
You're cooking a barbecue out here. I see myself with you and Tito cooking something in June, drinking a whole bottle of this.
Yeah. Just one, huh?
Pinchos. With pinchos in Puerto Rico, could work. Ricky, este rosado está brutal. Gorgeous. So why don't we make a pause and then we continue part 2 of my chat with you with the bubbles. Is that okay?
Perfect.
Because I'm really looking forward to that. Mi gente, volvemos ya mismo con Eric Bates. Estamos aquí en los Finger Lakes haciendo una cata de vinos de clima de frío y vamos a las burbujas y luego tenemos una sorpresa muy especial para ustedes. Hablaremos con el nieto de Dr. Konstantin Frank. Este fue el episodio de hoy. Recuerda dejarnos una reseña para que nos ayudes a crecer, suscribirte y recomendarnos con tus amigos amantes del vino. No importa cuán avanzado estés en el recorrido de enamorarte de aquello que decían sobre el vino. Son uvas transformadas en poesía. Aquí hay espacio para todos. Salud y como siempre, dale share.